Recording. Okay, cool. So that appears to be recording. Thank you for joining. Let's just do some introductions because I know we have some new people here. So my name is James. You guys all know me. I won't explain my research. You know what I do. But Andrew, Gavin, and Ian, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I can go first.
Yeah.
All right. So, I'm Gavin, and I'm currently at Miramar trying to get into UCSD. And I've currently challenged myself to read one scientific paper a week, and I want to present them here. Uh, and I posted my previous ones in my channel for the past 2 weeks, but I have this week, which I did on uh, intestinal macrophages modulate synucleopathy along the gut-brain axis. So whenever ready, I can present that.
Okay. In that case, I'll probably present the novel transformer architecture paper just to change it up because my other one is also again biomedical engineering. So just so we have two different themes. Do you want to go next, Andrew?
Sure. I'm Andrew. I'm a fourth year currently at UCI. My research currently revolves around the epigenetic factors of. Well, I guess I'll explain it like this. We're looking at remethylation of newly replicated DNA to see if there's factors that, or to look at the dynamics that affect cell fate, essentially. Yeah. I have a paper I could present. However, the focus of the paper is not why I'm interested in it, so it might be redundant to do that.
All right. And Ian, do you want to give a brief introduction?
I'm currently studying at RPI Applied Physics. I do not have any research going on right now. I'm just here to observe the meeting. Kind of
like
put me on the
National
spot here.
Geographic.
I wasn't expecting this.
And he also has a focus in nuclear engineering in applied physics.
Yes, I forgot to say
He's
that.
he's currently doing a course with the Linear Particle Accelerator on campus. All right. Do you want to go first, Gavin, or do you want me to go first? It is up to you.
Um, I can probably go first, but I wanted to say something for Andrew. You said that the focus doesn't pertain to what you're interested in. That's going to be like me most weeks, honestly, because I
Oh, no,
just
no, no.
want to.
What I mean is like the paper. The reason why I've been looking over it is because they use a method of analyzing long read analysis, and that's really all I've dug into in that paper. The actual paper itself
Okay.
is about something kind of tangential to what my research is. So I've only really looked into the paper, and I could describe what I'm looking at. And I don't mind doing that. There's enough content there to give a decent explanation. It's just, yeah.
I think that'll be cool to contribute. But I'm probably gonna be doing random stuff every week is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that is what I'd like to see people do here. Our seal literally says studium sciente. It just means pursuit of knowledge. The point of this is to learn random stuff and be an
Okay,
excuse
cool.
for us to get to do things that we just think sound cool. Like novel
That sounds
transformer
awesome.
architecture sounds cool. So, yeah,
But yeah,
it can be
you
simple enough.
told me what to do, James, and all I've really been doing is just scrolling through Nature, and if I see a title that looks interesting, I read the abstract, and if the abstract is interesting, I do this.
Yeah, yeah. If
So,
like at the end of the day, if you find something that sounds cool enough to motivate you to learn, you're learning novel research at the forefront of current science, which is only gonna help you. So like it's very useful in my opinion.
all right, cool.
All right.
Uh,
Do you want to share your screen and screen share the paper and just like scroll through and show figures and give some talking
uh,
points?
yes, I can. I guess I can screen share the paper,
Also,
but I also need to keep
if you would
my
like me
notes.
to screen share the paper, I could do that and you could just tell me where to go on it.
Um, no, I'll screen share it.
Okay.
But I need to just open up my thing on my phone. Okay. Okay.
All right, cool.
And everyone see?
Yes.
Okay. So this paper, intestinal macrophages modulate synucleotopathy along the gut-brain axis. So the abstract in English here, from what I gathered from it, is that basically there's a lot of evidence. So I'll start with what I found interesting about this. I was really always interested in like the new revelations about the like gut brain kind of stuff. How there's like a lot of microbes and there's a lot of stuff we are learning about how our gut operates and how it affects like everything we do. So that's why I thought this one was pretty interesting. Um, I learned first off that the gut brain is called ENS now, enteric nervous system. But anyways, so there's evidence coming out that Parkinson's disease starts out in the gut in the beginning. And I was like, wait, really? So, and this was drawn on the evidence that people with Parkinson's disease first have constipation, and there's a lot of present circulating T cells that are responsive to like the misfolded amino acid for that's in Parkinson's disease, but we never really understood why or like the cellular mechanics of this so far. So that's what this paper is for. They experimented on a bunch of mice and they found a mechanic that works cellularly that is one part of the initial factors that causes Parkinson's disease. And what they found was that intestinal macrophages initially carry the misfolded amino acid, and the expression of more or less of these macrophages like will control the spread of Parkinson's disease in the beginning. How it works is that the macrophages that have that folded amino acid will then activate T cells, which those T cells spread through the membrane that's around the spinal cord and up the spinal cord and into the central nervous system or the brain. So that's how they've discovered like how Parkinson's disease spreads from the gut to the brain. And they put in this paper, they found that you're able to control the rate of Parkinson's disease through the presence of these intestinal macrophages. So they, in order to do this, like, well, so I have like my
Real quick
question.
would you re-explain the thing that they correlated with the induction of Parkinson's? Like, are you saying it's the proliferation of macrophages from the gut along the gut-brain axis that induces Parkinson's?
So that is one of the initial factors that led to Parkinson's disease. And what they found was that the prevalence of the macrophages, either repressed or like injected, would carry the amino acids that would then spread it to the like up the spinal cord and into the central nervous system. So yeah, I thought that was a big shocker. What they basically did to figure that out is that they injected lab mice with they injected the lab mice's macrophages with like extract of Parkinson's disease, as they said, and that misfolded protein then started to become more prevalent, and like the macrophages, like they spreaded that protein more, and then it started continuing the disease of Parkinson's disease.
Would you go to figure 2 in the paper? You can just hit download PDF on the. Oh wait, does this give you the whole paper here?
Yeah.
Oh, sick. Okay. Is that the quantification of the proliferation of the misfolded protein from the Parkinson's extract you're talking about in those
Yes.
fluorescence staining pictures?
Yeah.
Okay.
I get a little lost in all the like this.
No, that's okay. It's impressive.
This is
like,
difficult.
You're newer to reading papers, and you went from like surface topology optimization to a cosmology paper to a novel bio paper. Like it's not easy to go between those.
Mhm. Um, they also found that when they depleted these intestinal macrophages in the laboratory mice that had Parkinson's disease, it produced the T cell expansion, which leads to the spread towards the central nervous system. That was another thing that they found. So the consensus of the paper was that like either promoting or reducing these macrophages will control the rate of Parkinson's disease expression. Mainly the amino acid that is causing it. And what they hope to get out of this study was that they hope to make, what is it, the modifier or biomarkers. They hope to have biomarkers from this discovery now that they understand the cellular mechanic that starts in the gut. They want to make biomarkers that can help indicate if someone has Parkinson's disease earlier rather than our current tests. It was pretty cool. I also posted a lot of like terms and definitions from this paper, and I'll do that in a second on the channel in Discord. But that is the consensus of my paper. But I'll post what I wrote in a moment here if you want to read.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Gavin? I'll go ahead and start then, because I have a question. So, macrophages ironically serve as the transport vector for moving this misfolded protein from the gut to the brain, which proliferates that issue throughout the brain's microenvironment that I guess at some point gets to the motor cortex and causes the symptoms of Parkinson's. What do you remember like exactly like what role T cells played in that? Because I know you've been talking about the T
it
cells
was it was the T cells that are I don't know if it spreads the amino acid. I think it does. It was just hard to gather from this, but I think what actually spreads it to the motor is the T cells. Is the macrophages activate the T cells. Does that make sense? It goes from the intestinal macrophages to the T cells to actually affecting the central nervous system.
Okay.
Is what I've gathered.
So the
I hope I'm not wrong on that.
Are in the T cells?
I think they are in the same thing. I think they're both prevalent in it, but I'm not 100% sure on that actually, but I can try to find that.
Macrophages do activate T cells.
Yes.
So I wonder if it's in both or if it's just in T cells. That's interesting that the neurodegenerative issue starts in the gut brain. That's big.
Yeah, that's what caught me.
Yeah, that is not what is, yeah, that's that's a very big deal actually. That's very interesting. I wonder if this was already known and this paper was like, as people in papers like to say, elucidating.
Okay, to answer your question, I think this kind of explained it a little bit. It's just hard to get through the terminology.
T cells invade the CNS. So T cells are the transport vector. Isn't CCR2
T cell aggression.
Yeah, CCR2 is a receptor for macrophages. So injection of if they did anti-CCR2 that abolished the T cell migration. So they're showing that the macrophage. Okay. Well, at the very least, we know that the misfolded protein is present in the T cells, and the macrophages are the catalyst for their chemotaxis or transport to the brain. The brain, not the gut brain.
Yes, brain.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Interesting. That's yeah, so this is what's really cool about just reading like big papers that are recent in science is like something like this. Like the derivative of the neurodegenerative like misfolding is in the gut. I never would have imagined
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's very interesting.
This came out when? Yeah, a couple days ago.
A few days ago. So this
Mhm.
research was probably done like 2 years ago, but it's now available. Nature's very slow to publish.
I see.
Um,
That makes me excited to know what's currently not published.
wait. I'm gonna stutter. Not Sujan. You're published in Nature, right?
Yeah.
How long did it take for your paper to actually get like, or is it even up yet? Are they still?
I think it's it's really up. That being said, every time I search it, it still shows it as like being under review.
Okay.
But I did get an email a while back to go officially publish it, and that was after that one had already gotten published a year prior to that. So I imagine if it's not already up, it's up very, very soon.
Okay.
Maybe I'll scroll past it sometime.
Yeah, the anecdotes that I hear are not great. Any other questions for Gavin? All right. Well, thank you for the presentation, Gavin.
Welcome.
All right. So, I guess now I will present. So I am going to just steal I'm not stealing it. I made the thing, but I'm just gonna reuse a presentation I made for a research group that I help run on campus. It's the Green AI Institute. I made a presentation for them, and it's on a novel paper published recently in one of the main AI conferences. I think it was ICML. I don't remember. But I have a nice presentation for it, so might as well make use of that. Let me share my screen here. Make sure you all can see what's going on. All right. Can you guys see this?
Mm-hmm.
And don't worry, there's not an expectation for people to make presentations. I know this is your first time, Gavin. I'm just using this because I already made this and gave this as a lecture on campus. So, like, I have a presentation. Usually we just screen share papers. You don't have to make slides. But,
I don't want to make slides.
yeah, no, that would make
Make
this
this
a
not
little
fun.
bit too much of a commitment, yeah. But yeah, I just had these for another thing, so I may as well use them. And we're gonna ignore the first half of this because the first half of this was on how to write a lit review, which is really not relevant to what we're doing. So we are gonna go to here. So basically, I'm going to have to start with explaining a lot of the fundamentals of how a large language model works, like ChatGPT. Because I assume I'll just mention some things. I assume the answer is going to be no. Do you guys understand, like, embedded dimensionality in tokens and the query key and value matrices and their role in multi-layered emergent logic?
The most basic
Probably
things,
not.
and I could probably not answer a question if you asked me.
Okay, yeah. So, okay, I'll just go through it all then. I didn't expect so because this isn't anyone's like niche of research here. So, let's start from the very beginning then and ignore the abstract for now. So, tokens are the fundamental unit of information in analysis for large language models. Let's say we give it a sentence. This is an RPI joke. MPAC started sliding. I was giving this as a lecture at RPI. So, wrong audience. But let's say we have this sentence. MPAC started sliding. The first step is intuitively simple. We have this process called tokenization. A token could be defined however we want to define it. Most normally, it's a word. It could be a subword, it could be a character, could be a syllable, could whatever you want to make it. Usually it's a word. So we make a list of the strings of these words. MPAC started sliding. Okay, that makes sense. That sort of data structure is something widely used. Then we assign an ID to each of it. 417, 8, so just random numbers. We put a random number to assign to that token. That makes sense too. If we tell the computer call on 417, we're saying call on the token MPAC, or started. So that all makes sense. What's very interesting about the structure of large language models is something. Well, okay, it's a few things. It starts with embedding dimensionality to an individual token. So for every single one of these words that we tokenize, it has a dimensionality of size D. And this size is something arbitrary we could choose. 64, 128, 512 is the most common right now in literature and functioning models. But basically, we give some token, we're calling it x1, dimensionality D. So it's a vector in, this is computer science notation. This was to a lecture hall of CS undergrads, masters, and PhD students. So I'll ignore the math notation for now. But basically, every token has a list that is, we'll stick with 512 numbers long. And there's just these random numbers, like 1.23, negative, just random numbers the computer puts in to assign to this token. So every single word that's tokenized gets this embedded dimensionality, and it's this list of all these numbers. And this raises a question, what are these numbers? How does the computer use this? Why do we have a huge list of numbers for every single word the computer has? Is the first number like the probability it could find it on a website? Is the second number maybe like the likelihood it should put it after an article in a sentence? Like what are these numbers? Unfortunately, we don't know. You may have heard about how.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. So I can explain some parts of this, but unfortunately, you may have heard about how about a decade and a half ago, our understanding of modern AI architecture diverged from its function. Like we've lost the ability to know what's going on under the hood. Have you guys heard about that?
yes, I have heard about
Yeah.
that.
So this is why. So here's what I
Wow.
can tell you. Here's what we do know. Basically, these numbers are like a emergent language that these transformers function on. We don't know exactly what they do, but it is how information and logic is stored for every given token, and the computer in each instance decides what these numbers are going to mean based off of how it's trained and its initial parameters for training. So what specifically they mean in each case depends on the computer and depends on the context and is not something we know. There's not a human analog to it. It's its own language, but it's the way the computer can store its data to actually have utility in referencing a token beyond just a word. So we give it access to this huge amount of data storage for each thing, and then it can learn to manipulate these numbers in a way that it understands to actually do things with its information. This is the foundation of large language models and this modern architecture of artificial intelligence. Now, if it just had, oh yeah,
I have a question.
yes.
How big or small can these numbers be, and how many of them assigned to a usual token?
The average right now is 512. 512 of these numbers for every single token. It could be
How far can they range?
Theoretically, you can make the number whatever you want. The limit is computational ability. I don't know.
Okay, so integer limit. Okay.
I mean, yeah. Right now, we could probably put it up to thousands, but like you need big data centers, and there's probably not utility in doing that yet. But 512 is what they're doing right now.
512. Okay.
512 numbers for every single token. And you can imagine if you.
And this is basically a language that machines use, and we can never really understand. Okay.
Yeah, it's contextually independent. Like in each individual circumstance of a new instance of a model, it uses it in its own unique way based off of its training, and it just learns to use it in the way to accomplish what we want it to do.
That's crazy.
It is.
Okay.
It's that's why I referred to it as an emergent language. Like it's
totally
what it is. Its own foundational logic structure. So the thing is, if we just have embedded dimensionality with tokens, a machine learning algorithm can't actually do anything. Um, it can't actually make comparisons or relations or do anything. So we have these really important matrices, these three core matrices of token relation called query, key, and value. And this is how a large language model actually gains the ability to connect things with each other and actually do things. This is how it can compare tokens to each other, how it can combine tokens, how it can decide if it should put this token after this token, how it should do things. This is the fundamental tools that an LLM has to actually process its information, and these are what enable this, combined with the embedded dimensionality of tokens, is what enables emergent logic to create its own language. So we're going to talk a little bit about these. Now that I've explained some of this, I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to talk about what the paper is about, because this isn't about the paper. This is some context before the paper. The paper, there's this premise called attention. We're going to define this in a moment. But for now, you can think of it as a token attending to a token is a computer deciding what token should come next based off of the values tokens give to it off of that embedded dimensionality. And there's a problem with normal attention computation. It's extraordinarily computationally expensive, really expensive. We'll talk about why. This paper came up with a very unique way to solve this problem, and they created a way to do the full resolute attention computation and spare themselves a lot of the cost. So we'll touch back on this again in a moment. But we mentioned these matrices: query, key, and value. Query is the idea of what is this token looking for. So any token could query another token. Key is the token announcing itself, saying, here's what I have to offer. When it's queried, the token gives its key information. And that could be advertising it's a noun or an adjective. It could be giving its length. It's probably doing all of those things. It's telling the querying token, here's what I have to offer you. If the querying token then decides based off the key that it has useful information, based off what it's querying, the value of the queried token will then be transferred to that initial querying token. We're going to talk about this for the next few slides, but that's a brief overview of this. So we have these matrices that perform this fundamental logic. They are the transformations on the data that enable processing. So each of these, for each token, there's a vector that's created. Let's say we're going token I. So we have query I, key I, and value I. These are not full matrices yet. These are just a vector. We have this thing called the weighted matrix. This is another combination of a bunch of random numbers that the language uses to learn. This is the part that actually comes from the machine learning. This is from where we have that if you've ever seen like this thing, like a CNN, a convolutional neural network, this diagram, this part trains weights. You can set the initial weights, but this part trains its weighted matrices to trend towards accomplishing what it needs to accomplish. For every single token, a weighted matrix for query, key, and value is trained, and we get a vector for each of these. A vector the size of whatever we made the embedded dimensionality. So this is the exact same size of that 512 list, but now it's new numbers, and these new numbers somehow correspond to how this token can query other tokens, what information this token will provide, and what it'll give in the context of being queried. For every single token, we now have 3 more 512 long lists, and also a huge matrix is 512 by 512 of all the weights for its learning for every single token. So it's already getting a ton of data. So we get these vectors, the query, key, and value vector. And then we do this for every single token, and we create the overall Q, K, and V matrix. And we have these matrices where every row is a huge list of all of those 512 numbers and each row corresponds to one token. There's a row for every single token, and all those values they pertain to how a token can query, how it can give its information, or how it can advertise what it has to give, and then what it should give. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Sorry to interrupt, but I think I gotta go.
All good, all good. Thank you
Later,
for
guys.
showing up on such short notice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll present my stuff at the next one next week.
Have a
Later.
good night.
All right. Cool.
See ya.
Later, guys.
Does anyone have any questions before I continue?
I just thought this was interesting.
Okay. So, we have now we have these query key and value matrices. Right now, we're building up towards this computational process called attention. When and how can a token attend to another token, get value from it, and decide to actually do something and have the model decide what to put next. So, we have these. We still don't have attention yet. Now it's time for attention. So, Q, K, and V, these matrices can be used to produce the attention matrix, which will give the idea of how it should actually work with all of its different token relations. And we can get a attention number for every single token relation to another token. That's an overview of attention. Let's go through the steps on how we compute it, and I'll explain specifically what it is as we go on. So, step 1, we compute a relevance score. There's this thing called the dot product, and it's where in a list we have every single value multiplied with every single value. So they all interact with each other. It's a colloquial way of thinking.
I remember that.
Yep.
I remember that from calc.
Token I querying token J. So the query vector of token I that has all that information on what do I want to request, dot products with the key information of token J saying, well, here's everything I can offer you. They all interact. We get one singular value. We call this value, what do we call this? Is that AI? A sub I? I think that's A sub I. We basically get this value, that wouldn't be A sub I. Okay, we call it score ij. I guess we'll just keep it that for now. So we call this value score ij. And this is how well does J have what I wants. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
So we can do this dot product for every single token to token relation. Every single one. So we go and we do this. For I, we do the score of ij, the score of ik, the score of il. We check every single token relation for I to every other token. And we build up this whole list of all the values of how well I relates to every single other token in this individual context. Then we normalize the scores with something called softmax. It doesn't have to be softmax, but we normalize the scores. What this means is we make it a probability distribution to where everything sums up to 1, and the larger the number, the better the relation is. Softmax in particular, the way this functions, we exponentiate the given values to exacerbate the differences in magnitude. What I mean by that is larger values get made really large and smaller values get made really small, so they're easier to tell apart. That's just the nature of exponentiation. We use that to our advantage here. Then we divide it by the number of these terms that are exponentiated to normalize everything to the value of 1. So then across token relations, everything can be equally understood in its magnitude. Does this make sense?
Less so.
Okay. So basically, the idea here, going back to this part, you understand how we do the dot product for I to every single token, and we make a list of a ton of values? Yeah. So now for each of those, for this whole list we've made, so the numerator, it doesn't have to be E. People like to use E, but you exponentiate it. That's going to make the larger values even larger and the smaller values even smaller. Does that part make sense?
Yes.
And the reason why is so we can have a bigger distinction between larger and smaller values. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's the numerator. That's half of it. So it's a better way for us to differentiate between the varying values. Then we divide it by the sum of all of these exponentiated terms, which normalizes it. What this means is all of these values now, when they add up, will sum to 1. So everything is now a percentage out of 100%. They all sum to 1. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what the softmax function does. All we're doing is normalizing. So we do this, and now we have a list of how well I can attend to all these other tokens, and how well all these other tokens can attend to I in the context of its querying. So now we have the vector A sub I, the attention of I, and how well every other token attends to I based on its query. So now we do this for every single token. We get an AI, an AJ, an AK. And we do how does every single token compare to every single token and every token relation. We normalize them. We get the vectors for every single one. We put them all together. We get this huge matrix we call the attention matrix, A. You can start to see why this process is very computationally expensive. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a problem. This is a really expensive quadratic operation. So then at the very end we have this attention matrix, and let's say we want I to attend to something and we want the actual value. Well, all we have to do is take the element in the matrix. Let's say how well does I attend to n. We take that idea, multiply it with the value n can give, and n will spit out the stuff that I would want from it without having to go through that stuff every single time. So that's the value in attention, is now we have this matrix of how every single token relation can request the information it needs from an individual token. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to go through and sum every single token relation, going through every single token, pulling out the values of everything, we would have the information on how every single token should react with every token, and be able to start building sentence structures and have a prediction model on language. We would have a large language model. That's where this comes from. So this is the foundation of the logic of an LLM, like ChatGPT, a large language model. We get this context vector based off of all this attention computation, and it can give how tokens should attend to each other to actually build language structure based off of its understanding of how it was trained from those weighted matrices. Problem is, this is really expensive to do. So this paper came up with a way to do this much better. Now we're actually moving into what the paper did. Before we do this, any questions?
I just think it's crazy that
Yes, it is.
all that to make AI slop.
I was drinking water as you said that. I had to be careful not to spit it over my keyboard. That's one way to put it.
That's crazy.
I like to think this is more trending towards having better ability in predicting protein interactions, like with AlphaFold,
Yes.
or in weather prediction coupled with quantum computing. But right now, I guess we do tend to see this more used to watch dogs emit a pressure washer out of their mouth at a grandma.
Oh god.
Okay, so what did this paper discover? Well, we talked about it earlier. The problem with the attention computation is it's quadratic, and if you know anything about quadratic, it doesn't scale nicely when we start to get to very big numbers. This is proportional to the number of tokens times the number of tokens. It's quadratic. So there's a way to fix this, and it's with something called linear kernel approximation. I'm not going to go into all of this math here, because this, again, was for an audience of like senior CS and masters and PhD CS students. So, this is not as relevant. But I will colloquially explain how... What is this part 2? Okay. I will colloquially explain how this linear kernel approximation works. So, remember how we have this whole attention matrix, and it does the value for every single token relation?
Yes.
Well, what if we just summarized all the key values of a token in a given sub area of this matrix? Let's call that a kernel. So we just summarize all those key values, and then we put the attention in, and instead of doing it for 1,000 tokens in one kernel, we just do it for one big averaged key. And then we see within that area, well, maybe there's actually really high attention there for what we want. Now, we don't know exactly where it is because we summed it. So we know somewhere in that 1,000 token region, there's a spike in attention that we want. But it loses resolution. But we can get a rough idea. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea of this linear kernel approximation. This is how previous papers did this, and previous LLMs were trained. There's a problem. It gives you a rough idea. We lose a lot of performance because now things are compressed, so we don't know exactly where things are. So the LLM can't perform as well. So this paper said, what if we could do the exact piece we need without having to check everything? Because here's the thing. You can intuit that not every token-to-token relation is what's needed in that situation. As a matter of fact, the huge majority of them are extraneous. They're not relevant. It's a very small amount of token-token relations that carry the bulk of the useful signal for attention. But you have to go through every single token-token relation to figure out which token is the right one. But what if we could just jump straight to the right one and not worry about having to check every single one with that super expensive quadratic computation? Well, that's the question this paper asks. And they say, how can we do that? How can we go straight to the one that is needed without having to check everything? And it's a combination of using this linear kernel approximation with what they call a trained teacher model. So, we just talked about this. Not all attention is useful. There's particular relations that are needed. That's intuitive. It stands to reason that the exact token we want is probably 1 or 2 or 3 specific tokens. It's not everything. Checking everything sucks. We don't want to have to do that. So, how do we do this? It's what they call a teacher-student model with something called a sparse mask. So, this paper trained a model they called SEA. I don't remember what that stands for, so we're going to scroll back up here. Sparse linear attention with estimated attention mask. I'm not going to remember that. We'll get back to that. Okay, so phase 0 of creating this C model, SEA. They create first something they call the teacher model. This is not the SEA model. This is a model to teach C. So, this teacher model does the full expensive quadratic attention computation. The full shebang. This can't be run locally. This can't be done dynamically and quickly. It's expensive to do, but they do it for some cases. And then they use that model and train itself to predict where will the useful parts be. So they treat this as a prediction model. And they train this model to start to predict where will the useful parts be through iterating it with its weighted structure. So it can start to, again, predict where the useful attention relations will be. So they run this expensive teacher model and they build up I'll call it a function. It's not really a function. It's more a matrix. But they build up a function to predict where the useful attention relations will be. So they use this function to make what they call a sparse mask. Now, just to briefly define some terms in novel LLM research in the context of attention computation, sparse attention computation means doing less of the token-token relations. Dense attention computation means doing more of them. The full quadratic computation, that's as dense as it gets. The sparser it is, the less we're doing. Like that linear kernel approximation, that's pretty sparse. If we make it sparser, we save on computational resources. We can run it more accessibly and run it quicker, but usually we lose performance. But in this case, well, now we have a teacher model that does the full expensive quadratic computation, learns to predict off of that where the useful relations are based off of contextual data in any given instance, and then it creates this mask that says, okay, here's where you'll find what you need. You don't have to actually do the full thing, just here's where you'll probably find what you need. It doesn't always work, but it works like 80% of the time. So they give this sparse mask now to the student model. And this model runs linear kernel approximation. It doesn't run the expensive one, so we can do it quickly. So we run the linear kernel approximation, and then we see roughly, well, in what kernels is there a high spike in attention? It's like, okay, well, maybe over here in this group of 1,000 tokens, we see there's a high spike in attention. We don't know which token relation it is. That was lost because we did a linear approximation with the kernel method, but it's somewhere here. But now we can lay the sparse mask on top of that kernel and get predicted information on exactly where it should check for those high value attention relations with high relation mass. And that is where the huge utility comes in. in this student-teacher model with this constructed sparse mask, were able to lay this over, do the cheap linear approximation, hone in on a region of high attention signal, lay this mask over, and then find these specific attention relations without having to check everything. It doesn't always work, but it happens to work a lot, actually. And this saves them a ton of information. And they're able to do the full performance calculations with the useful attention relations without having to check all that extraneous information, because the teacher model was able to create its own prediction mask to know where these things are without checking off of its experience with running that computation. So the C model takes this mask and it now computes sparsely in the high signal kernels. And so, like, you can modulate how many of these relations it should check. Obviously, if you just say only check the single highest relation, it might not be that good. The more relations you check, the higher performance it's going to be, but the more expensive it's going to be. So this is in the paper what they call top K selection or top key selection. And this is where you modulate how, like, what's the threshold for actually running it based on the sparsity mask. And that's where you decide, do we take the top 5, the top 5 token relations according to the sparsity mask, the top 10, the top 300, how many do we do? They check multiple in this paper to find out what's the sweet spot in terms of being more expensive computation, but also getting better performance. So they run through it and iterate through these. But basically, this paper came up with a way to run this full fundamental quadratic attention computation with all that query key and value information for every single embedded token dimensionality, learn how this data interacts with each other contextually, create a sparsity mask to say here's where the high signal attention relation should be, give that mask to a cheaper kernel linear approximation model, have it do the kernel analysis, hone in on particular kernels of high signal, lay the mask over, and then find the high relation attention, the high relation, or the high attention value relations between tokens, and do the full quadratic computation just on the useful relations, and then output the information. A lot of things going on here, but this is what they did. And they basically found a way to get the high performance quadratic resolution without having to check every single token off of building a prediction mask from a teacher model. And they found that this model they created is able to perform with significantly less memory than the top existing benchmarks, perform faster with less latency, and converge faster and not need as much training, while also being less perplexed. Perplexity is a specific thing in AI. There's a formula for it, but to spare us time, colloquially, it's, did the AI choose the right answer, and or was it confused about it being right or wrong? Obviously, you want it to be less confused. So it's kind of, this model was less confused. So basically, this model did a lot of useful things, and it outperformed other existing models that use the linear kernel approximation and this level of memory usage, basically showing that this works. Obviously, as we take the K values higher, we have less perplexity. It does then incur more computational cost. But, you know, you can see the sweet spot, like 64 brought it substantially lower. Here, I'll zoom in more here. 64 brought it quite a bit lower than 32, but then 128, not a lot lower than 64. Some around 64 is probably the sweet spot for the top K selection. But basically, they created this way to get the high resolution information for a much more efficient cost. That's why I presented this at the Green AI Institute RPI chapter, because it's an energy efficient approach to training these models, so Green AI. But I wanted to present this here less because of this paper's novelty and more just to talk about how transformer architecture works, because I think these forms of artificial intelligence are becoming pretty prevalent in all fields of academia, and I think it would do us well to understand their fundamental structure, at least to some extent, so we can speak some of the language of potential collaborators who work in this field. But yeah, this is not the Green AI Institute, though I do represent it in some facets, but that's the presentation that I have to give. I want to thank you guys for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.
So if I'm getting this right, they basically just taught intuition into this language model.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it, and
Cool.
that's a very that's not a new approach. There's a lot of instances of, I mean, you've heard of the AlphaFold software, right?
Nope.
Oh, okay. So protein simulation used to be extraordinarily computationally expensive. Took massive supercomputers, tons of simulations. AlphaFold now makes that run on like a local machine in a matter of minutes to hours. It's the exact same premise, teaching intuition, teaching
Cool.
prediction based off of contextual data. Any other questions?
Not really. You explained it very well.
All right. Well, thank you guys for showing up then. It is fun having you. I'm glad we get to discuss these things. I will
Yes.
see you guys next time.